Welcome, everybody, to this webinar put on by the Multiple Sclerosis Foundation. Today, we will be featuring one of the organizations, the functions in the MS community that is near and dear to my heart and has been since my own MS diagnosis in the mid-1990s. I've been doing their twice-a-year surveys every time they come out since that diagnosis. And I'm really excited to have Dr. Fox and Dr. Salter with us today to sort of fill us in on the value and the benefit and the insights that gives us in the treatment arena for MS. I am the patient healthcare liaison for the Multiple Sclerosis Foundation, and I'm also an MS certified nurse. Anytime people have questions regarding treatment questions or symptom management, you're more than welcome to email me, sherry@msfocus.org. And now I'd like to introduce our panelists. Dr. Amber Salter is a an associate professor at UT Southwest. She's a biostatistician. And Dr. Fox is a neurologist at the Mellon Center. And now I'm going to turn it over to the two of you. Dr. Fox, could you go ahead and share your screen and put up your slides? And I will go off camera during your presentation.
Sure. Well, thank you very much, the MS Foundation, for inviting us to join with you today and share a little bit about what we do in the NARCOMS MS Patient Registry. We have entitled our talk, Turning Your Stories into Science, because that's really what we do. We take the experience of people living with MS and learn about MS through that. And we will be explaining about the NARCOMS registry and how it works and how people can get involved in it. But first, on to our introductions. As was just mentioned, I'm Bob Fox. I'm a multiple sclerosis focused neurologist at the Mellon Center for Multiple Sclerosis here at the Cleveland Clinic. I see patients in our outpatient MS center, and I also am involved in a variety of research projects, clinical trials and registry research, amongst other things. I also serve as vice chair for research for the Neurological Institute here at the Cleveland Clinic, and since 2011, I have been fortunate to be the managing director of the NARCOMS registry. And now I'll throw it to Amber to introduce herself.
Hi, so I'm Amber Salter. I am, as was introduced, a biostatistician by training, and I'm at UT Southwestern in the Department of Neurology, and I'm specifically in a section that's on statistics within that section. So I do a lot of statistical analyses and study design within neurological diseases, but I have a big focus in multiple sclerosis. And since 2015, I've been running the Data Coordinating Center for the NARCOMS registry, which means that I'm responsible for collecting the data, both paper and online, and managing the data and performing data analyses. I also do a lot of other clinical trial design for within MS and yeah, lots of other hats, but those are my main ones.
Great. So we would like to share with you a little bit about what this NARCOMS registry is. Now, first, what does NARCOMS stand for? It is the North American Research Committee on Multiple Sclerosis. It's a little bit misfortunate name now. It's not anything to do with narcotics. And now with the sensitivity around narcotics, it sounds like something related to controlled substances, but it's not. It is an MS patient registry, a voluntary registry of people with MS. It's available worldwide, although it tends to focus here in the United States. It was started in the mid-1990s by Dr. Tim Vollmer as a project of the Consortium of MS Centers. And although Dr. Vollmer has since retired, the project still remains under the auspices of the Consortium of MS Centers. The core elements of the survey are semi-annual surveys. We have an enrollment survey as well when people enroll, and we occasionally have additional surveys, and we'll dive into some of the details in a moment. We have over 6,000 active participants in the registry, and we are managed by a tripartite leadership. You've met two of them, myself and Amber, and also Dr. Ruth Ann Murray, who is an MS trained neurologist from Canada, and she serves as the scientific director. So, what's our vision? Our vision, the ultimate goal, the ultimate purpose of why we do this, is to improve clinical care and quality of life for persons with MS and their families. And we do that through increased knowledge about MS. And so this is what guides all of what we do, which is to understand as much as we can about MS, that then we in turn turn around to help improve the clinical care and how people are living their day-to-day lives. So our mission and goals, the mission then is to conduct epidemiological, that means widespread data capture across populations of people, and health services research, meaning looking into the different aspects of people's health care and how health care is delivered in multiple sclerosis. We also want to support new researchers, bring new researchers into the field of multiple sclerosis research. And we want to facilitate new emerging, growing research areas and to collaborate with researchers across different areas to learn more about MS. So that's our mission. Our goals then is to increase the understanding of MS from the perspective of who better else than to tell us about MS than people living with MS. We also want to assess the knowledge. What do we know about treatments, about services, about the care that people with MS receive? And then once we learn that, we want to disseminate that out. We want to share that knowledge out to the world, out to clinicians, out to other researchers, out to people living with MS to increase the knowledge, what we know about MS, and the awareness of those various things that we've learned. So let's dive into some of the nitty gritty. After signing up, and we do have an extensive questionnaire at enrollment, the main core of the survey, as you heard from Sherry, is our semi-annual survey. We have recurring elements about relapses, about disability progression. We don't ask your neurologist for any assessments. It's all from you. So it's patient-reported disability, and that is the PDDS scale, the patient-determined disability status scale. We also ask about employment and health insurance. Now, not everyone works, and that's okay, but we do ask about how things may have changed since the last survey, both in terms of employment and in terms of health insurance. We ask about symptoms of MS, and we are focused on 12 different symptom domains using the Sympto MS screen. We also ask about disease-modifying therapies, the so-called MS drugs, although there's a lot of therapies that are involved in caring for people with MS. And we ask about how people's general health is with the Health Utilities Index. We also, from time to time, will ask about special topics, special things like comorbidities, which is other illness or other conditions that people have, like high cholesterol or depression or hypertension. We sometimes will ask about diet. We'll ask about symptom therapies, how people are treating their stiffness and spasticity or their bladder difficulties or their mood disruptions. We have also asked from time to time about cognitive leisure activities. What do you do? How do you spend your time? And they come out in the spring and the fall. And you can see here the opening of our spring survey that introduces the things that we asked about last spring. So then what do we do with it? Well, we're asking a lot of different questions about the disease, about quality of life, about the caregivers, both the medical caregivers that people interact with, as well as the personal caregivers, the people who help you at home or help you with various aspects of your MS. We ask about other health conditions, about medications, access to care, really all different aspects, every way MS may impact your life. We ask about it and want to understand it. We do it through structured surveys. So we, wherever we can, use established survey tools that have already been developed by other researchers and have been validated as useful tools. Now, one of the benefits of being in the registry is a magazine that we produce 3 to 4 times a year. Here are some examples of our recent ones. And they're sent as primarily a thank you to those who are participating in the survey, as a thank you for that contribution. We also give feedback about the surveys, so you can see results of surveys that you have taken, to see how your answers may relate and may compare to those across the MS community. So these magazines have the results of NARCOMS surveys. They have updated information about the MS field, different educational pieces, and we have some word finds and crossword puzzles and some fun things as well. They're meant to be informative updates, and we put a lot of time and energy. It costs a lot to produce these, but we do think that they are valuable for our participants, and it's an important thank you and acknowledgement. Here's just an example of some of the different aspects, the different elements that we had in the last issue from last winter, issue 4 of 2024. So, how might you participate? Very easy. The easiest way is to go to the NARCOMS website, narcoms.org, and you can enroll right there. You can click on a link there. You can also email the MS Registry at msregistry@narcoms.org. You can also use the old-fashioned telephone. We do still have a telephone, have someone who answers that. You can also scan this QR code from your smartphone or other smart device, and that will link you to our enrollment as well. And it's very easy to do. It doesn't take very long, and these surveys take about 30, 45 minutes, depending on the survey, and depending on how quick you are in filling them out. We do offer it both in paper and online. Some people prefer in paper and having it physically written. We'll mail it to your house and you can fill it out and mail it back to us. And other people prefer to do it online. It's a little bit easier on the computer for some people. We really don't care. It doesn't matter. Either way is completely fine with us, whichever you find easiest. And of course, one of the main benefits is you can be involved in MS research from the comfort of your own home, from the comfort of your own office or your car or wherever you choose to fill out the survey. And for what amounts to about an hour or so a year. So with that, Amber, there is a lot of talk about data security, and confidentiality and how much personal information is floating around the internet and from one entity to another. So tell us a little bit about how NARCOM secures its data and the personal information of our participants.
Sure. Well, you're right, Bob. It's very important these days with data security, and we obviously um, take it very, seriously as well. That's the word. So we, where the data are stored are on secure servers at the university, UT Southwestern. They live in what's called RedCap, and that's where the surveys are administered, which is also a secure sort of platform to collect data remotely from people. And again, this RedCap is hosted on secure networks within the university. All the communication is encrypted, so you know, so that that's all taken in, and it's and hopefully and it is safe. There's lots of background sort of IT support that comes from the university that helps ensure all of these things are maintained. The security is maintained on a 24-hour basis. And then within our data, we also keep contact information separate from all of the survey information, so that There has to be very purposeful linking of any contact information with any other data, which we really don't do unless there's really a need for it.
And that contact information, that's name and address,
Yes.
email, telephone number, that sort of thing. And
Yes.
that's kept in a very separate area of the database under an even more solid and hard to penetrate lock and key
Exactly.
to prevent access to it.
Yeah. And we have to be given permission to even get into that, right, into those pieces. So I have to give people permission in order to get into that database. So it is under lock and key. Uh, so within REDCap. And then we do, as Bob mentioned earlier, we do try to encourage collaboration with other investigators and bringing new investigators into the MS field. And so what we do when we work and partner with these people on their projects is that they have certain requirements that they have to meet before they're really we'll do any work with them. And so they need to have they need to have their ethics approval through their institution. If they're an investigator at a university, they have to tell us what their project is, and it has to be approved by the executive committee.
Which
That
is us.
is, yeah. But it's also we don't do marketing studies, right? Like we're really interested in the science and making sure that we think this is something that is going to be applicable to our participants, and really try to minimize burden and not waste people's time. I mean, your time is a valuable resource, and we want to make sure that there is something that's going to be useful to come out of it. And then they need to have a data use agreement. If we're actually, sometimes we'll do recruitments for other people. So they've got a study and they want to just see, do you have any people that meet this criteria that can, we'd like to send them some information about the study. And we do, when we look at the data, at your data that we have that might meet their criteria to get into that study. And then we send out the information. So none of your contact information is going outside of NARCOMS. So that we do that communication. And then if you want to participate, it's completely up to you. If you want to or not, you won't hurt our feelings if you don't. But we just wanted to give these opportunities to other people. And then we send it out. And then if you want to reach out to that collaborator, then you are really it's at your leisure to do so.
So other researchers outside of NARCOMS never get the contact info, never get the names and the addresses. We send out their recruitment information, and it's as a service, right? It's as a courtesy of, hey, you may be interested in this research trial, in this research study that's going on close to where you live.
Correct.
And that signed data use agreement, that's essentially a contract, right? That's a contract that obligates them to follow the rules of the data. But even then, the data is de-identified, meaning it's never has a name or a date of birth or a phone number. It's only the answers to the questionnaires, not your personal information.
Correct, with a unique ID that's not linked to even your NARCOMS ID. So we even changed the ID and only we hold the key. So really there's, a lot of protections in place to not give out, to protect the information that we have.
Great.
Your information.
All right. So Amber, tell us a little bit about some of the research and we'll kind of hand this back and forth. Tell us about the women's health study that we did.
So this was a joint project that was in collaboration with the International Advisory Committee on Clinical Trials in MS. And they were really interested in understanding what were priorities for women's health issues among women with MS. So as part of this, they put out the International Clinical Trials Committee put out a survey, but we also did too, and included this in our semi-annual survey. As Bob mentioned, we have some sort of unique sets of questions that we do, and it was really interested in that. A whole bunch of different research topics that were gathered from focus groups, and we asked participants to rank these different priorities and what they felt was most important and what needed more research in MS. And so all of these results were kind of put together, and it identified some really key areas to focus MS research on women's health issues. Menopause was one of the was one of the highest priority research topics that came out of this survey. And it was really neat to see just recently the National MS Society put out a call for funding within this area to try to actually drive, more research in this area. So I think it shows nicely how, it can have some input on things and actually drive where research efforts get focused.
Right.
So.
And so that research call from the U.S. National MS Society was guided and molded in part by NARCOMS participants responding to our surveys and giving input as to what they felt were the most important women's health issues to be addressed and studied. That's great.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, let me turn to COVID. COVID is something that has touched all of us in one way or another, either directly or indirectly. And so we were commissioned by the U.S. National MS Society to do some study about COVID and the impact of COVID on the disease course. And so, with grant funding from the National MS Society, one of our surveys asked about COVID and asked a lot of different questions. One, we're asking who got COVID and how it was confirmed and the different symptoms and different aspects. We published 3 papers then based on the data from that survey. I'm only reviewing 2 of the papers here for the sake of time. But one is we looked at what impact did COVID-19 infection have on the overall disease course of MS? And what was very reassuring is that the overall disease course of MS was not impacted. It was a negligible impact in the people who did contract COVID compared to the people who didn't, and comparing the trajectory of MS before COVID to the trajectory of MS after COVID. So that was very reassuring that COVID does not seem to be altering. It's still a pain in the butt. I understand it's not an infection anyone likes, but we were reassured that it did not seem to have an impact on the long-term course of MS. It also did not seem to have an impact on MS symptoms either. We then turned to, well, what about the MS disease activity? Did it seem to trigger MS relapses? What we found was a little bit surprising. One is that after COVID infections, the risk of a relapse was a little bit lower, or the likelihood of a MS relapse was a little bit lower in people after they got COVID than people who didn't. However, looking at other infections like a bladder infection or a respiratory infection, we saw the other way around. It was somewhat higher likelihood of an MS relapse after those other infections compared to COVID. Now, I don't want to say COVID infection is protective against an MS relapse, and we certainly don't know the mechanisms and why an MS relapse would be less likely after COVID and more likely after the other infections. But it did teach us that not all infections are the same, and some infections can have a different impact on the short-term disease activity in our MS patients. All right, so those are just 2 examples, and we have published well over 100 papers on MS. But we're doing more things. And so ongoing right now is a study we're doing on genetics. So Amber, do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, so this is as Bob mentioned, is a new project that we've got going. We are really interested. We have so much longitudinal data and data on MS progression over time using our PDDS. And we were really wanting to see if we could use some of the new genetic tools that have come out to help understand whether any of these genetic factors might be associated with progression. So we've been funded by the Department of Defense, which has had a MS research program. And we are collecting saliva samples from our participants that are enrolled in the registry. And here, it's really easy to participate. I mean, just kind of you have to be enrolled in the registry and then consent to participate. And we send you the participants a saliva kit by mail, give the saliva, and then you send it back to us.
Pretty
It all,
simple. So it's
yeah,
just
pretty
spit.
simple. That's really it.
So no
Um,
blood, no spinal tap, no brain biopsy, just
no,
spit.
just a little bit. It's a little bit more than a little bit of spit, but that's all that it is some saliva. So we're really excited about this. And I think as the world of MS sort of progresses with genetics, this will be really exciting, and we'll be able to participate in some of the bigger consortiums and have quite a bit of longitudinal data to go along with that, with those genetics. So we're really excited about this. We're kind of a little over halfway through our recruitment goals, but again, it's just we're trying to do things that are interesting and I think have some value and can be done remotely, or things, or looking at ways to expand the registry and what we do.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. The registry for years has been asking questions of people living with MS, which is really, really important. And now we're looking to expand that out and connect to other pieces of data, other pieces of information that we can't get through surveys, like genetic. So, genetic assessments to then connect genetic information to the disease course and symptoms and those other things that we collect from people. Now, there are some people who don't want their genes looked at, and that's totally fine. So this is an optional sub-study within NARCOMS. So for people who don't want us to look at your genes, totally cool. Then you don't participate in this. That's fine. You don't spit into the sample collector and ship it back to us. But again, this is confidential and the data stays within NARCOMS. So people who are in NARCOMS who want to participate in this, this is another opportunity to continue involvement in MS research. That's
And I
great.
think and I think we also plan to continue to do this as people are enrolled. As you know, I think it's something we want to add on as people are enrolled. And if you're interested in it, that would be, something else you could participate once you've enrolled.
It is. But again, if some
You don't
people
have to.
say,
Yeah.
I'm happy to fill out
Yep.
a questionnaire, I don't want anyone to look at my genes. Okay, that's fine too. We're happy to have people participate in the core without doing that additional genetics.
Exactly.
And we are planning to look at frailty. So tell us a little bit about frailty. First, what is frailty? I feel like I'm getting closer, whatever that is.
I know. So frailty is an individual's ability to tolerate sort of illnesses and other stressors. So this is somewhat of a new concept in MS, but we are really kind of interested in understanding maybe if frailty plays a role in how people might respond to certain things. So take the infections, for example, right? So someone gets an infection, somebody is maybe more frail might not recover from that illness as well as someone who is a little bit less frail.
Or
Um,
struggle more, have more impairment and take longer to recover from a simple upper respiratory infection or a simple bladder infection. So it's kind of resilience. So
it is
medical
resilient.
resilience.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. So we're going to be asking some questions that can allow us to basically come up with this frailty index that's been published and is kind of used in the sort of frailty area, and really start to look at some of these issues with the frailty and our measures that we have cross-sectionally and hopefully over time.
And so this is an area of medical research in general that we are now exploring in MS and are going to ask our participants
Yeah.
about.
I mean,
Great.
we know that there's a lot of heterogeneity in MS, right? And a lot of people, just a lot of variability that within how people, their outcomes and how they respond. And this may be one of those things that might help explain some of that variability.
Great. All right, so let me just end our formal time here, and we do welcome questions and comments and discussion. So please get yourself ready for that. We do have social media presence. So people are welcome to follow us on Instagram, Thread, and Facebook. So you can easily search for us or just look at these handles or names. Also, a new thing for those who might be participating here today and are already part of NARCOMS, we are starting a NARCOMS Neighbors program. And so that is a way where people who are already participating in NARCOMS can help introduce NARCOMS to their friends, to their neighbors, to other people living with MS through social media, through direct interactions, in-person events. However, they choose to spread the good word about NARCOMS, because I'm convinced, and maybe many of you who are listening will attest, that the most likely reason that people have MS and are not participating in NARCOMS is because they haven't heard of it, because they don't know about it, and they don't know how easy it is to participate in MS research from the comfort of their home or office or car or backyard. So the NARCOMS neighbors help spread the good word about NARCOMS. There also is a QR code here where you can scan to learn about the NARCOMS program. So with that, we will stop and open for questions. Again, as a reminder, people can enroll in the registry at narcoms.org or this email or the old-fashioned phone call or scan the QR code. All right, Sherry, back to
Thank,
you.
thank you. Do you want to stop sharing your slides so we
I
can see your faces
I
in
can.
larger? Um, this has been very, very helpful. I'm often asked to explain to people what NARCOMS is, and I just tell them you get asked the same questions every 6 months. But the value of that is, and I've been able to look back at my disease progression over time and realize how much better I am than I was a few years before, just because you can go back and see the data that's been captured. So that's been very, very helpful. And I enrolled in NARCOMS Neighbors last week.
Ah, fantastic.
So,
Okay,
um,
so I'm going to give you a clap here.
and I encourage you all to do that as well. Karen wants to know if we participate in the genetic testing, are we allowed to see our results?
It's a good question, Amber.
We are not allowed to do that at this time. And part of it is because, at least right now, when genetic information is given, it has to be given by people who are qualified genetic counselors, which we are not, or I am not at least. And so I think right now the answer is no. I think maybe as the landscape changes and some of the information may become um, available, it's something that we can ask to be done in the future. But right now it isn't possible.
It's a tricky area
Yeah.
because, in part, we don't know what to do with this genetic information. That's why we're doing this research study to understand the genetic information's intersection with people's clinical course. Um, and it's not directly actionable either. Now, there are some gene tests that are directly actionable. You're positive for this, you're at high risk for breast cancer. The monitoring for breast cancer may be changed and modified. Right now, we don't really have genes that we know and understand that would lead to MS care being different. Like, oh, you should go take this therapy, or you should avoid that therapy, or you should get an MRI more often, or something like that. So we don't yet have actionable findings, things that would then change the course of someone.
I think also that may help us to answer the questions of why some people don't respond to certain disease modifying therapies. Um, I've heard the statistics that in persons of African descent, they don't tend to respond to the interferons as persons of Caucasian descent do. And so my hope is that this genetic testing is going to maybe at some point in the future inform us which persons will respond best to which disease modifying therapies.
Absolutely. And that's our goal. And that's what's done in cancer now. When a biopsy is taken of a cancer, they look at the genes and they say, okay, based on this gene array, this is the best treatment course for you. We don't have that yet for MS, but we're hoping to.
Judy wants to know if there's any financial support to NARCOMS from the pharmaceutical companies.
So the short answer is no, but there's some caveats to that. So we are a project of the Consortium of MS Centers, and that is a nonprofit professional trade organization. People can check out their website at mscare.org. And it is a trade organization of providers, of clinicians who take care of people living with MS, neurologists and nurses and pharmacists and psychologists and social workers, occupational therapists, all sorts of providers who touch and care for people affected by MS. So that is our main funding support. We do have collaborative agreements with researchers. And we do research with anyone who has an interesting scientific question for us to address. It can be academic researchers, it can be industry, it can be nonprofit foundation. We mentioned the COVID study that was funded by the National MS Society because they said, hey, we're getting a lot of questions about COVID from our patients. We want you to look into this. We also have collaborative research agreements with pharmaceutical companies. Now, we don't do marketing surveys, but we do surveys looking at, well, what is the course of patients who go on your drugs or patients who have side effects from your drugs? What are they and why? And why do people start some drugs and then stop them later? So we can understand the science behind the therapies that our industry partners are producing. We also receive funding for the magazine, the NARCOMS Now magazine, from our industry partners. Now, we operate that magazine completely independent from them. And we have two industry partners right now who are providing unrestricted support for the magazine, but we don't send them the topics. We don't accept from them suggestion about topics. They don't review our magazine ahead of time. It is a completely arm's length distance support. So we do utilize industry and other collaborators and funding from them in order to operate the registry.
Thank you. I have an anonymous attendee who had genetic testing done through one of the ancestry services, and the raw data told her that she had the specific HLA gene connected with MS. That gene is activated by the Epstein-Barr virus. And do you ever focus on the specific HLA gene and Epstein-Barr virus infection, and why those with HIV have a lower risk of MS and half of them using antivirals have an even lower risk? So it seems like there's a lot of questions in
There's a
there.
lot of questions in here. Uh, Let me start with in terms of the registry, we have not focused on the specific HLA genes, which are immune system related genes. But we are looking through this ongoing, this in process gene study at a large number of genes and how they may relate to the disease course. So, no, we have not focused specifically on HLA. And we have not EBV either. One of the tricky parts about EBV is almost everyone who gets MS has been exposed to EBV. But then again, by the time people get to be about 20, 25, or 30 years old in the US, about 95% of people have been exposed to EBV. Now, it's pretty clear to me that EBV is a prerequisite, meaning a requirement to get MS, but 95% of the US don't have MS. It's a very, very small proportion. So it is not sufficient. Now, how EBV infection, does it have a play in MS? Does it have an involvement in active relapses? I think we still don't know, and I suspect it doesn't.
And then the last question that wasn't touched on in this person's question was
Oh,
why do those with HIV have a lower risk of MS? Could it be related to antiviral therapy?
it may be related to antiviral. I think, though, that that association was observed before before we developed effective antiretrovirals for HIV. So to me, the reason is most likely that HIV suppresses the immune system and makes it less likely to go beat up on the brain. So it's similar to the MS disease modifying therapies in reducing the immune system attacking the brain, but it does it through more of a profound immune suppression.
Carol wants to know if you survey responses to different treatment modalities.
And by responses to different modalities, I am going to have to just guess, and maybe she can add a clarification. I think she's asking about more than just MS treatments, MS drugs, and other aspects, nutritional supplements and dietary approaches. We do ask about dietary approaches. We've asked that in surveys before. So we are interested in all aspects of how MS patients approach treatment of their MS.
And I think also maybe to that effect, we ask these questions sort of independently, right? We're not really asking you, does your drug make you feel better, right? We're asking you, how do you feel right now? And then later we ask you also, like, what treatments are you taking? So that we can put the picture together, I think, somewhat independently. And we do make some comparisons within certain drug classes within the registry, or use it sometimes use it to adjust for things, to put people on even footing when we're putting them in the analyses.
Thank you. Um, Also, I think it's important that people realize that NARCOMS is gathering this data to inform the treatment community. And we're not deducing and letting our members know, well, your responses were this, so therefore we think that you should be on this treatment. We're not doing that, and some of the questions coming in are kind of hinting at that. For example, Rochelle says she's a PT. Rochelle is a PT, and her partner has relapsing MS, and they're a nurse. And she just wanted to ask, with the current data that you have, what is the best treatment for relapsing remitting MS?
So that's not a question we address. We
Right.
don't necessarily ask, is this better than another? We instead say, okay, who's on what treatment and how has your disease course gone? And we just observe that. Now, people can then infer based on the observations, well, I guess with this treatment, they have less relapses. With that treatment, they don't have as fewer relapses. But we don't say this drug is better than that drug. We more just describe what our participants, our people living with MS, report to us about how their disease modifying therapies, and we also look at symptom therapies. So we've done surveys of bladder dysfunction where we ask people, hey, those who have bladder difficulties, we'll invite them to an additional survey of how have you managed it, what medications, what devices, what approaches, and how successful have they been, what side effects, so we can understand from the patient's perspective their experience with various treatment approaches.
And
Thank
I
you.
think some people also take their surveys to their physician, and it sometimes can help in that communication with their physician if they're not feeling well, and they say, look at how I've kind of changed over time, and maybe it's time to discuss something different. And but again, that's done with their provider, but we can have some information that can help facilitate some of those conversations.
Thank you. Karen, I know you said when you first introduced this that you've got a little over 6,000 active participants in these
Yes.
longitudinal surveys. And for people that don't know what a longitudinal survey is, it's a survey that the same question is asked over time so we can see what the answers are if there's been a change in the answer over time. How many people are enrolled in NARCOMS altogether? And I believe I heard at one time there were close to 20,000 people that had signed up and had contributed over time to the surveys.
It's actually over 40,000 now. Now, the survey has been going on, the registry has been going on for over 30 years. So there are some people who lose interest and we lose track of. Some people have passed away. So we have 6,000 who are actively participating. And if you used to be in NARCOMS and you kind of lost touch and lost connection with us, we would be happy to reconnect you and to connect that old data with your new data to kind of get up to speed on how your MS is doing now.
Well, our anonymous attendee who was asking about the HLA gene and EBV is putting a bunch more information in there, thinks that you should be looking at this. So,
Yes, and EBV is a fascinating area, and the gene interactions with the HLA is a fascinating area. And I think this highlights how important adding different components to a registry are or is. In that we can ask all the questions we want, but we're never going to learn about something as important as genetic information until we capture that data and add it to connect it to our data set. We've also had projects where we connect our data to health systems data, to the data that your doctor and your nurse practitioner and PA collect and put into the health system to get a different perspective and different connection. There's also interest in registries like ours following people after a clinical trial because a clinical trial lasts only 6 months or a year or 2 years or 5 years. They never or very rarely go 20 years, where a registry like ours can provide the forum, the platform for patients who were in a clinical trial to continue contributing data to understand how whatever treatment was being looked at in the clinical trial, a drug or a device or whatever, we can follow patients over the long term. So I think the EBV question sort of points to the importance of connecting the patient reported data, which is what NARCOMS is, with other data sets like genetic information.
now, do you plan on retaining these saliva samples in a biobank sort of thing so that they could be shared with other researchers at some point in time?
Amber.
So we will, whatever is left over, they have from the processing, will be stored for potential use later. Back with us at UT Southwestern again, not somewhere else. And then um, if we're interested in collaborating on the genetic sort of studies later on, like I mentioned, the International MS Genetic Consortium, um, that is something where we can share the genetic data without the sample data, if you will. So we can participate without extra samples, actual raw samples, and use the data to do that.
But the
Now, one
short
of the
answer
things,
is yes. We're going to look at a certain amount of genetic information, but if additional questions come up and additional investigators want to look further, absolutely.
Or as the
one of the things
technology changes, right? I mean,
Yeah, as we
that
learn more.
also, yeah.
One of the things I noticed on the consent form when I signed up for this study myself was that you have the option to opt in or to opt out with sharing of your data with other researchers. So you don't there are safeguards built in so that anybody that may be interested in participating with this, if you're a little squeamish about or uncomfortable about where your data goes or if your actual saliva is going to be shared with somebody else, that's all pretty well spelled out in the consent form.
Yep, it is. That's a good thing to point out.
Yeah. Well, I don't see any other question. Oh, what I have one other thing. Your research tied to frailty. I know that you're beginning to focus on progression of MS and the impacts of PIRA or progression in the absence of relapse or independent of relapse. And I really think that as we get into this is what I've seen in my 50 plus years of nursing. And a lot of that has been focused on MS nursing, is that as people begin to progress, they become more frail. They're more prone to injury, to falls, to cognitive difficulties, to missing doses of medication, that sort of thing, to getting out of the work environment sooner. And I think as we're doing more, as more research is coming out of these studies in this registry, we're seeing that there is a contingent of people who've been on those higher efficacy therapies who are not progressing as quickly as they may have been. I noticed that in my own personal data, that my progression was almost reversed in starting on the higher efficacy anti-CD20 medications.
And
So
those are questions we can delve into at the population, at large group levels,
yeah,
using the NARCOMS data. But we can only do it if we have people in the registry and are completing the surveys and sharing their information with us.
yeah, you're so right. It doesn't get into the weeds. It looks at everything else above the roots.
Yep.
So, Summer, just want you to know this has been a wonderful program. Thank you
Thank
so
you so
Thank
much.
much.
you.
Our next webinar will be the 17th of September at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. It's one of our Hispanic Heritage Month webinars, and it will be in Spanish, and it's on the importance of early diagnosis and treatment of MS and neuromyelitis optica spectrum disorder. So look for the information to register for that if you are into either sharpening your Spanish or being spoken to in your native tongue.
Mhm.
And we're getting lots of excellent, excellent. Oh, Bavia says it will be in English, but it's a Spanish heritage, or Hispanic Heritage Month. Um, Thank you for clarifying that, Bavia. I was misinformed. I appreciate that. And thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Please stay on the line for just a moment after, if you're with us on Zoom, to answer a brief survey about what would be helpful for you to see with future webinars. And thank you so much to Dr. Fox and Dr. Salter. We really appreciate you taking time out of your workday to
Well,
teach
thank
us.
you. And Sherry, I'll just note, someone noted that they're from Kenya. This is open to the entire world. So we welcome anyone with internet access. You can even be on the moon. As long as you have access to the internet or get postal service up there,
I think we
we
mail
welcome
internationally, so
we welcome your interaction. We prefer the online rather than mailing to Kenya, if that's okay. But we do welcome people from all around the world. It'd be wonderful.
Thank you so much.
thank you, Sherry.
Okay.
Take care.
Thank you, Sherry.
Bye-bye.
Bye
Bye.
bye.